Venya didn't know the cloaked stranger watching her from the infirmary doorway was the Alpha King. She didn't know he'd spent 3 days tracking her through the slums of Valdrin, following whispers about a poor Omega whose touch could pull the dying back from the edge. And she definitely didn't know that agreeing to hear his desperate plea would unravel the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her secret and her heart. All she knew was that the child in front of her was burning with fever, and if she didn't act soon, he'd be dead before sunrise. The widow's rest wasn't much. A crumbling stone building wedged between a dyer's workshop and a collapsed granary, where the city's forgotten came to suffer in peace. Venya had worked here for 6 years, ever since she'd fled her home village with nothing but her mother's ring and a promise to never let anyone see what she could do. She pressed a damp cloth to little Tam's forehead, watching his labored breathing. He was 8 years old, born to a washerwoman who died of the same fever 2 winters past. Nobody would miss him. Nobody except Venya. The other workers had given up hours ago. "Let him go easy," old Marta had said, patting Venya's shoulder with resignation. Some aren't meant for this world. But Venya couldn't accept that. She never could. She waited until the room was empty, until even the rats had gone quiet in the walls. Then she peeled back the thin blanket and pressed both palms flat against Tam's chest. The power surged through her like molten light. Painful, beautiful, terrifying. She felt the sickness inside him, a dark knot of corruption wrapped around his lungs. She pulled at it, coaxing it loose, drawing the poison into herself where it burned through her veins before dissolving into nothing. Tam gasped. His eyes flew open, clear and bright, the fever broken. Venya collapsed against the bed frame, trembling, her vision swimming. It always cost her. Every healing took something, a piece of her strength, a fragment of her life force. Her mother had warned her about that before she died. "Use it sparingly," Mama had whispered, blood on her lips from the beating the village elder had given her. "And never let them see. They'll use you until there's nothing left." She had gripped Venya's hand with fading strength. "The gift flows both ways, child. You can push life in, but you can also pull it out. Never use that side. Never. It will consume you." Venya had been 12 years old when they'd killed her mother for witchcraft. She'd learned her lessons well. Impressive. The voice came from the shadows near the doorway, low, rough-edged, carrying the weight of sleepless nights and desperate hope. Venya's head snapped up, her heart slamming against her ribs. A man stepped forward, pushing back the hood of his traveling cloak. Even in the dim candlelight, she could see he was dangerous. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a jaw shadowed with stubble. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Pale amber, almost gold, burning with an intensity that felt like standing too close to a fire. "The infirmary is closed," Venya said, keeping her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. "Come back at dawn." "I'm not here for healing." He paused, something flickering across his face. "Not for myself." "Then you need to leave." She rose on unsteady legs, positioning herself between the stranger and Tam's sleeping form. Her hands were still shaking from the healing, her body screaming for rest, but she'd fight if she had to. She always did. The man didn't move. He simply watched her, those striking eyes cataloging everything, her defensive stance, her trembling hands, the way she'd instinctively shielded the child. "You healed him," the stranger said quietly. "The boy was dying. I've been watching through the window for an hour. His breathing was rattling, his skin was gray. Now he sleeps like nothing happened." His gaze locked onto hers. "How?" "I don't know what you're talking about." His fever broke naturally. "Don't." The word was soft, but carried an edge of command that made her spine stiffen. "I've spent 3 months chasing rumors of a healer in the slums. A woman whose touch can cure what medicine cannot. I've bribed informants, tracked false leads, and followed dead ends across half the kingdom. He took one step closer, and Venya's pulse spiked. I don't have time for lies. Venya's mind raced through her options. The back door was 12 steps behind her, but it led to an alley that dead-ended at the dyer's wall. The window was too small to climb through. And this man moved like a predator. She'd never outrun him. "Who are you?" she demanded, buying time. "Someone who needs your help." "That tells me nothing." "It tells you everything that matters." He reached into his cloak and Venya tensed, but he only withdrew a small object wrapped in dark velvet. He set it on the table between them and pulled back the fabric. A child's toy. A carved wooden wolf, worn smooth from years of small hands holding it. The paint faded to ghosts of blue and silver. Venya felt the pull immediately, that strange magnetic tug her gift created around objects that carried strong emotional residue. This toy was saturated with love, with fear, with fading hope. "My son," the stranger said, and his voice cracked almost imperceptibly on the word. "Tavrin. He's 4 years old. 3 months ago he collapsed during a hunt. Since then, he hasn't opened his eyes." Venya stared at the wooden wolf. "What did the healers say?" "That he's dying. That there's nothing to be done." The man's hands clenched at his sides. "I've brought in 1,000 healers from every corner of the realm. Physicians, herb witches, mystics, shamans. Anyone who claimed even the slightest gift. They've tried everything. Potions, poultices, prayers, blood magic. Nothing works. He just lies there, getting weaker every day, and He stopped abruptly, jaw tight, fighting for control. "I can't lose him," he finished quietly. "He's all I have left." Venya's throat tightened despite herself. She knew that desperation, had felt it herself the night her mother died in her arms. But sympathy was dangerous. Sympathy made you vulnerable. "I'm sorry for your suffering," she said carefully. "But I'm just a poorhouse worker. I have no special abilities." "You're lying." "No accusation, just certainty." "I watched you heal that boy. I've heard the stories. Patients who should have died walking out of here within days. Wounds that close too fast. Fevers that break without explanation." He held her gaze. "You've been careful, I'll give you that. Spacing out the miracles, making them look like luck. But patterns emerge if you know how to look." Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. And you know how to look? I know how to hunt, how to track, how to find what others miss. His amber gaze never wavered. "I also know you're afraid, that you've been hiding this gift your entire life, that someone taught you fear, probably someone who paid for your abilities with their life." Venya flinched before she could stop herself. To some council of frightened fools who burn what they don't understand. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to come with me. Look at my son. Try to heal him." He paused. "And in exchange, I'll give you anything. Gold, land, protection, a new identity in a territory where no one will ever find you. Name your price." "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't." The honesty startled her. "You have no reason to trust a stranger who tracked you down and cornered you in the dark. For all you know, I'm lying about everything. You're not making a convincing argument." "I know, but I'm done with convincing arguments." His voice roughened. "I've spent 3 months saying the right things to healers who took my gold and gave me nothing. Watching my son fade while charlatans promised miracles they couldn't deliver." He took a breath that shuddered slightly. "I'm tired. I'm desperate. And I'm asking, not demanding, not threatening, asking you to help me save my boy's life." The raw honesty in his voice cut through Venya's defenses more effectively than any threat could have. She looked at the wooden wolf again, feeling the echoes of a child's laughter trapped within its grain, the ghost of small fingers clutching it during thunderstorms. "If I agree to look at him," she said slowly, And I can't help? What then? Then you walk away freely. I'll give you gold for your trouble and never speak your name to anyone. You swear it? On my son's life. His eyes held hers, unwavering. On the only thing in this world that still matters to me. Venya should have refused. Every instinct screamed at her to reject the stranger's offer, to protect herself the way she'd learned to do. But she couldn't stop thinking about the wooden wolf and the small hands that had held it. About a 4-year-old boy lying somewhere in the dark, slipping away while his father searched desperately for salvation. One look, she said finally. I make no promises beyond that. Relief flooded the stranger's features, raw and unguarded, transforming his harsh face into something almost beautiful. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I might not be able to help. You're willing to try. That's more than anyone else has offered in weeks. He moved toward the door, then paused, glancing back at her. We should leave tonight. Every hour matters. I have responsibilities here. The patients. I'll send someone to cover your duties. Pay them triple wages. He said it like it was nothing, like gold grew on trees. Your patients won't suffer for your absence. Venya frowned. You speak like a man with considerable resources. I have resources. That tells me nothing about who you are. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then something shifted in his expression, a decision made, a mask lowered. My name is Rydian, he said quietly. And my son isn't just any sick child. He's the heir to the Valdrin throne. The words hit Venya like a physical blow. Rydian, the Alpha King. The ruler whose territory spanned from the frozen reaches to the Amber Coast, whose name was spoken in whispers throughout the slums, sometimes with fear, sometimes with grudging respect, always with the understanding that he wielded more power than any single wolf in memory. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The young Alpha who'd taken the throne at 22 after his father's death in battle. Who'd united the fractured packs through equal measures of diplomacy and ruthless force. Who'd lost his bonded mate during childbirth and never taken another. The last detail surfaced in her memory with sudden clarity. The queen had died. Which meant the child, the heir everyone assumed was thriving behind palace walls, had been slowly dying for 3 months while the kingdom remained oblivious. You've kept it secret, Venya breathed. His illness. I had to. If word spread that Tavrin was vulnerable, that the throne had no secure succession, every ambitious alpha in the realm would start sharpening their knives. Rydian's jaw tightened. I've told the court he's in seclusion, being educated by private tutors. Only my most trusted guards know the truth. And now me. And now you. The weight of that trust settled over Venya like a heavy cloak. This man, this king, had just handed her leverage that could topple his entire reign. One whisper to the right ears, and she could destroy him. But he'd done it anyway, because his son was dying, and desperation had burned away every other consideration. If I come with you, Venya said slowly, and anyone finds out what I can do, they won't. You can't promise that. I can. Rydian crossed back to her, close enough that she could smell pine and leather and something wilder beneath. Because anyone who threatens you will answer to me, and I protect what's mine. I'm not yours. No. His eyes held hers, and she felt something shift between them, a current of awareness that raised goosebumps on her skin. But you're under my protection now. That's not something I offer lightly. Venya's heart was racing, though she couldn't entirely blame it on fear anymore. Up close, the Alpha King was overwhelming, not just in size and presence, but in the sheer force of his attention. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. How do I know this isn't a trap? She asked. Kings don't beg help from slum healers. They command. They take. I've tried commanding. It doesn't work when your enemy is a sickness no one understands. Something bleak moved through his expression. "And I've never taken what wasn't freely given. I won't start with you." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. That despite every hard lesson her life had taught her about powerful men and their promises, she believed Rydian would keep his word. "I want a blood oath," she heard herself say. Rydian's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about blood oaths?" "My mother taught me, before she died." Venya lifted her chin. "I want your word sealed in magic, that I can leave freely after I've tried to help your son, that you won't trap me, imprison me, or use me against my will." For a long moment Rydian simply studied her. Then he reached to his belt and drew a knife. A beautiful blade with an ivory handle, the steel etched with symbols she didn't recognize. "As you wish," he said. He drew the blade across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, dark in the candlelight, and he held out his hand to her. Venya took the knife, her fingers trembling slightly. She'd never actually made a blood oath before, only heard her mother describe them. But instinct guided her as she pressed the edge to her own skin and made a shallow cut. The pain was sharp, immediate. When she pressed her palm to Rydian's, the magic ignited. It rushed through her like wildfire, searing, binding, transforming. She felt the oath take hold, weaving their promises into something unbreakable. But beneath it, wrapped around it, she felt something else entirely. A recognition, a pull. Like her soul had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact touch. And now that it had found what it sought, it refused to let go. Rydian's hand tightened on hers, his eyes widening. He felt it too. She could see the shock written across his features, the same stunned disbelief that must have been visible on her own face. "What?" Venya started. "The bond." Rydian breathed, his voice rough with wonder. "It's you." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Venya's hand remained pressed to Rydian's, their blood mingling, the bond pulsing between them like a second heartbeat. She could feel him, not just his physical presence, but something deeper. His exhaustion, his fear, the desperate hope he'd been carrying for 3 months like a stone in his chest. And beneath all of that, a flicker of something else. Something that felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. Rydian released her hand abruptly, stepping back. His expression had shuddered, that brief moment of vulnerability locked away behind the mask of a king. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than before. Venya wrapped her bleeding palm in a strip of cloth, trying to calm her thundering pulse. "The bond. What does it mean?" "It means nothing unless we choose it." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "The oath is what matters. You're bound to try healing my son, and I'm bound to let you leave freely after. Everything else is—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Irrelevant." It didn't feel irrelevant. It felt like the most significant thing that had ever happened to her. But Venya swallowed her questions, sensing that pushing would only make him retreat further. "How far is the journey?" "Half a day's ride. We'll reach the castle by dawn. I need to gather my things." "You have 5 minutes." Venya climbed the narrow stairs to her cramped room above the infirmary. Her possessions fit in a single worn satchel. 2 threadbare dresses, a comb missing half its teeth, a pressed flower her mother had given her the day before she died, and a small leather journal filled with drawings of medicinal plants. She paused at the window, looking out at the slums she'd called home for 6 years. The crooked rooftops, the muddy streets, the distant glow of tavern fires. It wasn't much, but it was familiar, safe in its predictability. Now she was leaving with the Alpha King to heal his dying son, bound by blood magic and something far more terrifying. What had she agreed to? Rydian was waiting outside with 2 horses, massive creatures that made Venya's stomach flip. She'd never ridden before. In the slums, you walked, or you didn't go anywhere at all. "Can you ride?" Rydian asked, reading her hesitation. "No." He didn't mock her or express impatience. He simply mounted the larger horse and extended his hand. "You'll ride with me then." Venya stared at his outstretched palm. The same hand that had clasped hers during the blood oath. The same hand that had made her feel things she'd spent her whole life avoiding. "I won't bite," Rydian said dryly. "Not unless you ask." Heat flooded her cheeks. She took his hand and let him pull her up, settling awkwardly in front of him. His arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her, and she became acutely aware of every point of contact. His chest against her back, his thighs bracketing hers, the warmth of his breath stirring her hair. "Hold on," he murmured, and then they were moving. The city blurred past them as they rode through empty streets and out the western gate. The guards didn't stop them. One look at Rydian's face and they practically fell over themselves to open the way. "Do they know who you are?" Venya asked. "They know enough not to ask questions." The road wound through farmland, then forest, then up into the hills where the air grew thinner and colder. Venya shivered despite herself, and Rydian's arm tightened around her. "There's a cloak in the saddlebag," he said. "We'll stop at the next clearing." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "It's not the cold." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Rydian went still behind her. "The bond? I don't know. Maybe. I've never felt anything like this before." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Then Rydian spoke, his voice low enough that she had to strain to hear. "Neither have I." They reached the castle as the first pale light of dawn crept over the mountains. Venya had seen drawings of noble houses in the books she'd borrowed from traveling merchants, grand structures of stone and glass that seemed to exist in a different world than her own. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of Valdren Keep. It rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all dark granite and sharp towers, with windows that caught the sunrise and blazed like fire-lit jewels. A waterfall cascaded down the cliff beside it, feeding a river that wound through the valley below. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a fortress that promised both sanctuary and imprisonment. Home," Rydian said quietly, and there was something complicated in his voice. Pride, perhaps, but also weariness, the weight of a crown he'd never wanted but couldn't set down. They crossed a bridge carved from living rock and entered through gates that groaned open at their approach. Inside the courtyard, servants were already stirring, fetching water, feeding animals, beginning the endless work of maintaining a kingdom. They bowed as Rydian passed, but didn't stare. Well-trained, Venya thought, or well-frightened. A woman emerged from the main doors as they dismounted. She was older, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a severe knot and eyes that missed nothing. Her gaze swept over Venya with cool assessment. "Your Majesty? You found her." "Nessa, this is Venya. She's agreed to examine Tavrin." Rydian's hand found the small of Venya's back, a subtle gesture of support. "Venya, this is Nessa. She's been running my household since before I was born. She's one of the few who knows the truth about my son." Nessa inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "I hope you're more skilled than the others, girl. The prince grows weaker by the day." "I make no promises," Venya said carefully, "but I'll do everything I can." Something flickered in Nessa's eyes, approval, perhaps, or simply relief that Venya hadn't made empty boasts. "Then follow me. Time is not our ally." They climbed stairs that spiraled upward through the heart of the castle, past tapestries depicting hunts and battles, past windows that looked out over dizzying drops. Finally, Nessa stopped before a heavy oak door guarded by 2 warriors who looked like they could snap Venya in half without effort. "The prince's chambers," Nessa said softly. "Prepare yourself." She pushed open the door and Venya stepped inside. The room was warm, almost stifling, with a fire blazing in the hearth and candles burning on every surface. The smell hit her first. Sickness, yes, but also herbs and incense, the accumulated residue of 100 failed remedies. And on the bed, buried beneath a mountain of furs, lay a child. Tavrin was small for 4 years old, his face pale as moonlight, his dark hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His breathing was shallow, barely visible, and his closed eyes were ringed with shadows so deep they looked like bruises. But it was what Venya sensed beneath the surface that made her stomach drop. Darkness, not sickness, not infection, something else entirely. Something that coiled around the boy's life force like a serpent, squeezing tighter with every passing hour. "What do you see?" Rydian's voice came from behind her, rough with barely contained fear. "He's not ill," Venya whispered. "He's cursed." The silence that followed was deafening. "Cursed?" Rydian moved past her to his son's bedside, his face carved from stone. "That's impossible. I've had mystics examine him. They found nothing." "Your mystics were looking for the wrong thing." Venya approached slowly, her hands trembling as she reached toward the child. "May I touch him?" Rydian hesitated, every protective instinct clearly screaming at him to refuse, but desperation won. He nodded once. Venya pressed her palm to Tavrin's forehead. The curse hit her like a wave of black ice, so cold it burned, so dark it blinded. She gasped, her knees buckling, but she didn't pull away. She pushed deeper, tracing the tendrils of dark magic to their source, and she saw a room filled with shadows, a figure in a hooded cloak, hands raised over a small carved wolf. The same toy Rydian had shown her. Words spoken in a language that scraped against her soul. And then a name, whispered with venomous satisfaction. "The curse sleeps until the boy is old enough to threaten my claim. Then it wakes, and the air dies slowly. The king will be too consumed with grief to see me coming." Venya wrenched herself free with a cry, collapsing backward. Rydian caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her, his voice urgent in her ear. "Venya, what happened? What did you see?" She was shaking violently, her vision swimming, the aftermath of the curse's touch leaving her hollowed out. But she forced the words through chattering teeth. "Someone in your court," she managed. "Someone close to you. They cursed him through the wooden wolf. Poured dark magic into it years ago and designed it to activate when he grew older. It lay dormant until 3 months ago." She gripped Rydian's arm, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This wasn't an accident, Rydian. Someone is trying to kill your son to get to you." Rydian's face went white, then red, then settled into something far more dangerous. A cold, killing fury that made Venya's instincts scream to flee. "Who?" The word was barely human, more growl than speech. I couldn't see their face. The hood. Venya pressed a hand to her throbbing temple. But they knew the curse wouldn't be detected by ordinary means. They wanted it to look like a wasting sickness. Wanted you to watch him die slowly, helplessly, while you searched for cures that didn't exist. Rydian released her abruptly, turning to Nessa, who stood frozen in the doorway. "The wolf. Where is it?" "The prince's toy? It's been in his chambers since he fell ill. He wouldn't sleep without it." Nessa's face had gone gray. "Your Majesty, if what she says is true." "Find it, now. Don't touch it with bare hands." Nessa hurried to the corner where a small chest sat, its lid painted with stars. She wrapped her hands in her apron and lifted out the carved wooden wolf, the same one Venya had felt calling to her in the infirmary. Even from across the room, she could sense the corruption pulsing within it. How had she not recognized it immediately? The love she'd felt radiating from the toy had masked the poison beneath, like honey hiding hemlock. "Can you break it?" Rydian asked, his storm-bright eyes fixed on the wolf. "The curse. Can you undo it?" Venya forced herself to stand, despite legs that felt like water. "I don't know. I've never encountered magic like this before. Dark magic requires a counter, something equal in power but opposite in intent." "What does that mean?" "It means I need to try something I've never tried before." She met his gaze steadily. "And it might kill me." "No." Rydian's response was immediate, absolute. Find another way. There isn't another way. The curse is too deeply rooted. If I try to heal him without destroying its source, I'll just be fighting shadows while it continues to feed. Venya looked at the small boy on the bed, his chest barely rising and falling. He has days at most. Maybe hours. I won't trade your life for his. It's not your choice to make. The words hung between them, sharp as a blade. Rydian stared at her with something like anguish in his expression. I just found you, he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear. The bond? You're my... He stopped, unable or unwilling to finish. I'm your best chance to save your son. Venya crossed to him, laying her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart pounding beneath her palm, wild and desperate. Let me try. If it becomes too dangerous, I'll stop. I promise. You can't promise that. You don't know what this magic will do. I know that a 4-year-old boy is dying because someone in your court wants power badly enough to murder a child. Her voice hardened. I know I have a gift I've spent my whole life hiding because I was afraid. And I know that if I walk away now, if I let fear win, I'll never forgive myself. Rydian's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it tighter against his chest. If you die, then you'll find whoever did this and make them pay. She managed a small smile despite her terror. I trust you to avenge me. That's not funny. I know. She pulled her hand free, steeling herself. I need the wolf, and I need everyone except you to leave the room. Nessa looked to Rydian, who nodded tersely. She set the wolf on the table beside Tavern's bed and retreated, closing the door behind her. Venya approached the table slowly, feeling the curse pulse with malevolent awareness. It knew she was coming. It was waiting for her. Whatever happens, she said without turning around, don't interfere. Don't touch me until it's done. The magic needs a clear channel, and if you interrupt, I understand. She took a deep breath. Then she wrapped both hands around the wooden wolf and let the darkness take her. The curse fought back with everything it had. It clawed at her mind, showing her visions of death, her mother's body burning, Tam's fevered face, 1,000 strangers crying out for healing she couldn't give. It whispered that she was nothing, worthless, a slum rat pretending to be something more. You can't save him, the darkness hissed. You couldn't save anyone. Your mother died screaming and you watched. You watched and did nothing. Venya screamed, or tried to. Her voice was lost in the void, her body paralyzed somewhere far away. But she didn't let go. She thought of Tavern, 4 years old. A boy who liked wooden wolves and had never asked for any of this. She thought of Rydian, the desperation in his eyes, the way he'd asked instead of demanded, the bond that hummed between them even now, anchoring her to something real. And she pushed back. Light blazed from her hands, not the soft golden glow of ordinary healing, but something fiercer, brighter, a sun burning away shadows. The curse shrieked in her mind, writhing, fighting, but she held on. You don't get to have him, she thought with savage determination. You don't get to win. The wooden wolf exploded in her hands. Venya collapsed. And from the bed, she heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a child's voice, weak but unmistakably alive. Papa? Venya drifted in darkness for what felt like eternity. She was aware of voices, distant, muffled, urgent, but couldn't grasp their meaning. Her body felt like it belonged to someone else, heavy and strange and impossibly far away. The only thing that felt real was warmth. A hand wrapped around hers, rough, calloused, and steady, refusing to let go. Stay, a voice kept saying. Stay with me. She wanted to answer, wanted to open her eyes and tell whoever was holding her that she was trying, fighting, and clawing her way back through the void. But the darkness was thick, and she was so tired. Then another voice cut through, higher, younger, trembling with fear. Is she going to die, Papa? Like Mama did? The hand around hers tightened convulsively. No. Rydian's voice, raw and wrecked. She's not going to die. She's going to wake up. And she's going to be fine, and we're going to… His voice broke. She has to wake up. Venya had never heard a king sound so broken. She fought harder, pushed against the darkness with everything she had left, following that voice like a rope thrown to a drowning woman. The void resisted, clinging to her, whispering that rest would be so much easier than the pain waiting on the other side. But Venya had never taken the easy path. She wasn't about to start now. Her eyes opened. The first thing she saw was Rydian's face, haggard, unshaven, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He was sitting beside her bed, her hand clasped between both of his, and when he saw her looking at him, the relief that flooded his features nearly undid her. Venya. Her name came out like a prayer. Thank the gods. How long? Her voice was a rasp, her throat dry as desert sand. 3 days. He released one hand to reach for a cup of water, helping her drink. The curse. When you broke it, the backlash? He stopped, jaw tight. You nearly died. Your heart stopped twice. The healer said… Another pause, his composure cracking. They said to prepare for the worst. But I'm still here. You're still here. He pressed his forehead to her hand, and she felt moisture against her skin. Tears. The Alpha King was crying. Don't ever do that to me again. I make no promises. But she curled her fingers through his hair, a gesture of comfort she hadn't planned. It felt natural. It felt right. A small face appeared at Rydian's elbow, dark hair tousled, amber eyes wide with wonder. Tavrin looked nothing like the gray, dying child she remembered. His cheeks held color, his gaze was bright, and when he smiled, she saw his father in every line of his face. You saved me, Tavrin said solemnly. Papa said you fought a monster in my dreams and made it go away. Venya's lungs forgot how to work. Something like that. Does that mean you're a hero? She glanced at Rydian, uncertain. I don't know about that. I think you are? Tavrin climbed onto the bed with the fearlessness of childhood, settling himself against her side like it was the most natural thing in the world. Heroes save people. You saved me. So you're a hero. He looked up at her with absolute certainty. And heroes stay, don't they? You're going to stay with us? The question hung in the air, far heavier than a child's innocent words should be. Rydian said nothing, but his eyes held hers, and in them she saw the same question and the same desperate hope he was trying so hard to hide. We'll see, Venya said softly. For now, I need to rest. Recovery came slowly. The curse's backlash had left Venya weaker than she'd ever been, her gift depleted to embers. Nessa brought her meals and herbal tonics, gradually warming from cool efficiency to something approaching fondness. Tavrin visited constantly, bringing her drawings he'd made and stories he'd invented, filling her room with the bright chaos of childhood. And Rydian was always there. He worked from her bedside, reviewing documents and meeting with advisors while she drifted in and out of sleep. When she woke from nightmares, gasping and clawing at shadows, he was the one who talked her back to calm. When she was strong enough to sit up, he carried her to the window so she could watch the sunset paint the mountains gold. He never pushed, never spoke of the bond or what it might mean. But she felt his awareness of her like a constant warmth, and the careful distance he maintained seemed to cost him more each day. On the 5th day, she was well enough to walk. Rydian found her on the battlements at dusk, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, watching the stars emerge one by one. He said nothing, simply stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not quite touching. You should be resting, he said finally. I've rested enough. Any more and I'll go mad. The healer said I should be dead. Venya turned to look at him. I'm not very good at doing what I'm told. The ghost of a smile crossed his face. I've noticed. Silence stretched between them, but it was comfortable now. Easy in a way Venya hadn't expected. "Have you found them?" she asked. "The one who cursed Tavrin?" Ridian's expression darkened. "We've narrowed it down. The dark magic required rare components. Components that only someone with access to the royal treasury could obtain. And the curse was designed to activate years after it was cast, which means someone's been planning this for a very long time. Yes." His hands clenched on the stone railing. "I have 3 suspects. All of them people I trusted. People who've served this family for decades." "Who?" "Lord Vashar, my father's former general. Lady Ione, who manages the treasury, and—" He hesitated, something painful flickering across his face. "Brennan, my cousin. The man who would inherit if Tavrin died without an heir." Venya absorbed this. "You think it's him." "I think he's the only one with motive strong enough, but thinking isn't proof. And if I accuse him wrongly—" Ridian shook his head. "He has allies. Supporters who believe he'd make a better king than me. One wrong move, and I hand him the excuse he needs to challenge me openly. So what do you do?" "I wait, watch, and hope he makes a mistake before—" He stopped abruptly. "Before what?" Ridian was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "There's something I haven't told you. About the bond." Venya's pulse quickened. "What about it?" "It's not just recognition. It's not just attraction." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made the air leave her body. "For wolves, a true mate bond is sacred, unbreakable. It means that our souls recognized each other as halves of a whole." He paused. "It also means that if one mate dies, the other often follows. The grief is simply too much to survive." The weight of his words settled over her like snow. "So when I nearly died, I felt it." His voice cracked. "Every moment. Like my own heart was being torn from my chest. And I knew—" He stopped, fighting for control. "I knew that if you didn't wake up, I wouldn't survive it. Tavrin would lose both his parents and everything I've built would crumble, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it." "Ridian, I'm not telling you this to trap you." He held up a hand, forestalling her response. "The bond doesn't force anything. You can still walk away, still live your life far from here. But I need you to understand what you've become to me, what losing you would mean." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "You're not just a healer I hired, Venya. You're everything. And I'm trying so hard to be honorable, to give you choice, to not be the kind of king who takes what he wants. But gods help me. I want you to stay so badly it's tearing me apart." Venya stared at him, her heart pounding. Every instinct she'd developed over a lifetime of survival screamed at her to run, to protect herself, to not let anyone have this much power over her. But Ridian wasn't asking for power. He was offering vulnerability, laying himself bare before her and trusting her not to destroy him. "Ask me again," she whispered. "What?" "After we find out who cursed Tavrin, after they're dealt with, and your son is truly safe." She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath catch. "Ask me to stay then, and I'll give you my answer." Hope flared in his expression, brilliant and desperate. "You're not saying no. I'm saying I need to be sure that this is real and not just gratitude or the bond confusing us or—" He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was hungry, desperate. 3 days of terror pouring out in a single moment. His hands framed her face, tilting her head back, and she melted into him with a moan she couldn't suppress. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ridian pressed his forehead to hers. "That's real," he said roughly. "Everything I feel for you is real. But I'll wait. As long as you need. I'll prove it to you every day until you believe it." "That could take a while. I have time." He kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. "For you, I have all the time in the world." Brennan made his move 3 days later. Venya was in the garden with Tavrin, watching him chase butterflies, when the first arrow flew. It missed her head by inches, burying itself in the tree behind her with a solid thunk. Training took over. She grabbed Tavrin, shielding him with her body, and ran for the castle. More arrows rained down, from the ramparts, she realized with horror. Someone had gotten archers inside the walls. "Papa!" Tavrin screamed. Guards materialized around them, forming a protective barrier. But Venya could hear fighting from somewhere deeper in the castle, steel on steel. Shouts of alarm. The unmistakable sounds of battle. "Get the prince to safety," she ordered the nearest guard. "I need to find the king." "My lady, you should... now." She didn't wait for agreement. She ran toward the sounds of combat, her depleted gift flickering weakly in her chest. She couldn't heal, couldn't fight. But she could damn well find Rydian and stand beside him. The throne room doors hung open, one ripped from its hinges. Inside, chaos reigned. Rydian was surrounded by a dozen armed men, fighting with savage efficiency, but even he couldn't hold forever. Blood streaked his face from a cut above his eye, and she could see exhaustion in the set of his shoulders. And standing on the dais, watching with cold satisfaction, was a man who shared Rydian's dark hair and sharp features. Brennan. He was younger, slighter, with none of his cousin's raw power, but the cruelty in his eyes made up for it. "Cousin!" Brennan called out mockingly. "You should have died with your son. Would have been so much simpler." "You cursed a child." Rydian's voice was ice. "Your own blood. He was in my way, as are you." Brennan gestured lazily. "Kill him. Make it slow." The attackers pressed forward. Rydian was good, incredibly good, but there were too many, and he was already wounded. Venya didn't think. She ran into the room, sliding between fighters, and grabbed Brennan's arm before anyone could stop her. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. The gift flows both ways. You can push life in, but you can also pull it out. For the first time in her life, Venya pulled. Brennan's life force rushed into her like dark water. His strength, his vitality, his corrupt little soul. He screamed, his face going gray with shock and pain. "Call them off," she hissed. "Call them off, or I drain you dry." What are you? "I'm the woman who broke your curse, and I can do so much worse." She pulled harder, and he crumpled to his knees. "Call them off." "Stop!" Brennan screamed at his men. "Stop fighting! Stop!" The attackers hesitated, then lowered their weapons. Rydian's guards swarmed forward, disarming them with brutal efficiency. Venya released Brennan, staggering back. The effort had cost her. She could feel darkness creeping at the edges of her vision, but she stayed on her feet through sheer will. Rydian crossed to her in 3 strides, pulling her against him. "Are you hurt? Venya, are you—" "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was about to collapse, but she'd be damned if she'd do it in front of Brennan. "Tavrin is safe. I made sure." "You brilliant, fearless woman." He kissed her hair, her forehead, and her cheeks. "You magnificent creature." Brennan laughed weakly from where he knelt, surrounded by guards. "A slum omega! You're throwing away your throne for a slum omega with unnatural magic. The Pax will never accept her." Rydian turned to his cousin with murder in his eyes. "The Pax will do as I command, and you—" He drew his sword. "You will face trial for treason, attempted murder, conspiracy, and the use of forbidden dark magic against a child of the royal blood. The council will never convict me. I have allies. Your allies are being arrested as we speak." Nessa appeared in the doorway, calm as ever despite the carnage around her. "Lord Vasher and Lady Ione send their regards. They were quite eager to cooperate once they learned you'd implicated them as suspects. Seems they didn't appreciate being used as cover for your schemes." Brennan's face went from gray to white. "You can't prove anything." "I can." Venya stepped forward despite Rydian's protective grip. I saw you, Brennan. When I touched the curse, I saw the room where you cast it. The words you spoke. The satisfaction on your face as you condemned a baby to die. She held his gaze, unflinching. Your magic left traces in every object you corrupted. I can testify to exactly what you did, and no council in the realm will doubt a witness who nearly died breaking your curse. Brennan stared at her with pure hatred. You'll regret this, Omega, when I— Take him away, Rydian commanded. I've heard enough. The guards dragged Brennan from the throne room, his threats echoing off the stone walls until they faded to nothing. And then Venya's legs gave out. She woke in Rydian's chambers this time. She recognized the dark wood and the massive fireplace from her brief glimpse during the fight. The bed was softer than anything she'd ever slept in, and Rydian was beside her, looking nearly as exhausted as she felt. You need to stop almost dying, he said when her eyes opened. My heart can't take it. I'll try to schedule my collapses more conveniently. He laughed, a real laugh, full and warm, and she realized she'd never heard him laugh before. It transformed his face, made him look younger, lighter, and almost carefree. There it is, she murmured. What? Your laugh. I was starting to think you didn't have one. I haven't had much reason to laugh lately. He reached out, brushing hair from her face with infinite gentleness. You gave me a reason. By almost dying repeatedly? By being you. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Brave, stubborn, remarkable you. Venya caught his hand, pressing her lips to his palm. The trial. When? Tomorrow. The evidence is overwhelming. Brennan's own allies are testifying against him to save themselves. Vashar provided records of the dark magic components. Ione traced the treasury withdrawals. It won't take long. And after? Rydian went still. After? You promised to ask me something. After Tavern was safe. After the threat was dealt with. She met his eyes steadily. Ask me. The hope that blazed across his face was almost painful to witness. Stay. Not for 7 days or 7 weeks. Stay forever. Be my queen, my partner, my mate in truth. Let me spend the rest of my life earning the chance you're giving me. What about the Pax? Brennan said they'd never accept a slum Omega. Brennan can rot. Rydian's voice hardened. The Pax will accept whoever I choose. And I choose you, Venya. I'll always choose you. Even though I'm not noble, even though I have no lands, no family name, nothing to offer but— You offered your life for my son. He pulled her close, cradling her against his chest. You faced a curse that should have killed you. You stood beside me when my own blood tried to destroy everything I'd built. His voice roughened. You have more nobility in your smallest finger than half the court combined. Anyone who says otherwise can take it up with me personally. Venya pressed her face into his shoulder, tears she couldn't explain sliding down her cheeks. I'm terrified. So am I. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail at being a queen, a mate, all of it? Rydian pulled back just enough to tilt her chin up. Then we fail together. And we get up. And we try again, and we keep trying until we get it right. His eyes burned into hers. That's what mates do, Venya. We don't give up on each other, ever. She kissed him. It was softer than their first kiss, slower, sweeter, a promise rather than a desperate claim. His arms wrapped around her, and she felt the bond pulse between them, no longer frightening but warm, welcoming, like coming home. Is that a yes? He murmured against her lips. Yes. She pulled back, smiling through her tears. Yes to staying. Yes to being your queen. Yes to all of it. Thank the gods. He kissed her again, then pressed his forehead to hers. I was fully prepared to beg. I would have liked to see that. Maybe someday, if you're very good. She laughed, and he laughed with her, and for the first time since her mother's death, Venya felt like she belonged somewhere, Brennan's trial lasted exactly 2 hours. The evidence was irrefutable. Testimony from his co-conspirators, the dark magic residue traced to objects in his possession, Vashar's records, Ione's treasury logs, and Venya's account of what she'd seen inside the curse. The council found him guilty on all charges. He hanged at dawn the next day. Venya didn't attend. She'd seen enough of Brennan's darkness. She didn't need to watch it end. Instead, she spent the morning with Tavrin, who had taken to following her everywhere like a small, determined shadow. He brought her flowers from the garden, showed her his favorite hiding spots in the castle, and asked endless questions about her gift and where she'd come from and whether she'd teach him to heal butterflies. "I like you," he announced solemnly over breakfast. "You make Papa happy. He didn't used to smile before." Venya felt warmth bloom in her chest. He didn't? Not really. He tried, but it wasn't real smiling. It was pretend smiling for other people. Tavrin studied her with those wise eyes so like his father's. Now his real smiles. Because of you. She didn't know what to say to that. So she just hugged him. This small boy who'd survived a curse and a coup, and still looked at the world with wonder. "I like you too," she whispered. Tavrin beamed. "Does that mean you're going to be my new mama?" The question hit her like a wave. She looked up to find Rydian in the doorway, watching them with an expression that made her chest fill with something too large to name. "Only if you want me to be," Venya said carefully. "I want." Tavrin nodded firmly. "Papa, tell her she has to stay forever." Rydian crossed to them, kneeling beside his son. "I've already asked." She said yes. "Really?" Tavrin's whole face lit up. "Really, really? Really, really?" The boy threw himself at Venya with enough force to knock her backward. Best day ever. Over his head, Venya met Rydian's eyes. He was smiling, that real smile Tavrin had talked about, and she felt tears threatening again. "Best day ever," Rydian agreed softly. The bonding ceremony was held on the night of the full moon. Tradition demanded it take place in the heart of the pack, the great clearing where wolves had gathered for centuries to witness oaths and celebrate unions. Torches blazed against the darkness, and what seemed like thousands of eyes watched as Venya walked toward her mate. She wore silver silk that caught the moonlight, her hair woven with winter jasmine. Her mother's ring hung on a chain around her neck close to her heart, and when she reached the ceremonial dais where Rydian waited, she wasn't afraid anymore. He looked magnificent in formal black, his dark hair swept back, his eyes burning with an emotion that stole her breath. Tavrin stood beside him, proudly bearing the ceremonial cords that would bind their wrists. "You came," Rydian said quietly as she reached him. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I thought you might finally come to your senses and run." Venya laughed. "Too late for that. I'm afraid you're stuck with me." "Good." He took her hands, and even through the ceremony's formality, his touch made her pulse race. "I intend to be stuck with you for a very long time." The officiant began the ancient words, but Venya barely heard them. She was too focused on Rydian, on the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, on the steady warmth of his hands in hers, on the bond thrumming between them brighter than any torch. "Fate forged between us. But because you, fate, forged between us. But because you showed me what courage looks like, what love looks like. You walked into my darkness and brought light, and I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." He squeezed her hands. "I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day until my last breath. This I swear." Venya had to take a moment before she could speak, her throat too tight with emotion. "I choose you, Rydian. Not because you're a king, or because you promised me gold and freedom, but because you saw me when I'd spent my whole life hiding. You asked instead of demanded. You protected instead of used. You showed me that power doesn't have to mean cruelty." She smiled through her tears. "I choose you. Your strength and your scars. your crown and your heart. I choose this family, this future, this terrifying, wonderful life. This I swear." Tavern stepped forward with solemn pride, wrapping the ceremonial cord around their joined wrists. The knot held, blessed by magic, witnessed by the pack. "Bound," the officiant proclaimed, "from this day until the stars fall silent, what fate has joined, let no force sunder." The pack erupted in howls of celebration, filling the clearing with a sound that resonated in Venya's very bones. But she barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her mate, her husband, her king, while their son bounced beside them shouting, "Finally! Finally!" Later, much later, they lay tangled together in the moonlight that streamed through their chamber window. Tavern had finally been persuaded to sleep in his own bed, and the castle had gone quiet around them. "Tell me something," Rydian murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Something I don't know." Venya considered. "When I was 12, right after my mother died, I considered letting the gift fade, ignoring it until it disappeared. I thought if I couldn't heal, no one would ever have a reason to hurt me again." "What changed your mind?" "A little girl in the village where I was hiding. She had a fever that was going to kill her. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that I didn't know her, that helping would only put me in danger." She paused. "I healed her anyway. Couldn't stop myself." Rydian pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's who you are. Someone who helps even when it costs you. It's gotten me in trouble before. It got you here." He pulled her closer. "I'd say it worked out." She smiled against his chest. "Your turn. Tell me something." "I knew you were special the moment I saw you in that infirmary. Before the blood oath, before the bond, just watching you heal that boy. The way you held yourself afterward, exhausted but satisfied, like nothing mattered except that he'd live. And you thought, what? That I could save Tavrin? I thought..." He paused, and she felt his heart beat faster beneath her ear. "I thought, there's someone worth knowing. Someone real, in a world full of pretenders." He tilted her chin up. "I was right." Venya kissed him softly. Flatterer. Honest. They lay in comfortable silence as the moon tracked across the sky. Venya thought about the woman she'd been 6 weeks ago, hiding in a crumbling infirmary, convinced that her gift was a curse, certain she'd never belong anywhere. That woman wouldn't recognize her now, wouldn't believe this was possible, but it was. All of it. The love, the family, the crown she'd never expected and still didn't quite know how to wear. "Venya?" Rydian's voice was drowsy. "Hmm? Thank you. For saying yes. For staying. For everything." She smiled in the darkness. "Thank you for finding me. Best decision I ever made. I thought the best decision was kissing me on the battlements." He laughed, the sound rumbling through them both. "That too." She closed her eyes, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek, the bond humming contentedly between them. Outside, the moon shone over the mountains of Valdren, silver light blessing the kingdom she'd somehow become part of. Venya had closed the infirmary that night, expecting nothing more than another shift of hiding and surviving. Instead, she'd found a king who saw her worth, a son who needed her love, and a life that finally felt like home. He'd asked her to touch his dying child. She'd given him back his world. And he'd given her everything she never knew she wanted. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free and it helps more people hear these stories.